Trophology, the science of food combining. Compared to Taoist concepts of balance, the Western notion of a balanced diet is simplistic and superficial. Western physicians advise everyone to take a little bit of everything at every meal, jumbling together such disparate ingredients as meat, milk, starch, fat, and sugar, all in the same meal. Such indiscriminate consumption of food is no different than pouring a combination of gas, oil, alcohol, and sugar into the gas tank of a car. These blends will not burn efficiently, will provide very little power, and will quickly clog up the entire engine so badly that the engine system grinds to a halt. The advice given in the quote at the beginning of this chapter from a book presented to the founding emperor of the Ming Dynasty on the occasion of the author's 100th birthday clearly reflects the fact that the ancient Chinese were well aware of the importance of the science of food combining. This wisdom was once known to the West as well, as evidenced by Moses' strict regulation that meat and milk must never be consumed at the same meal. In plain English, the yin and yang of diet boils down to trophology, a term which you and no doubt your doctor have probably never heard of. Modern medical training in the West, especially in America, is notoriously deficient in nutritional science, although there are a few enlightened nutritional scientists in America and Europe today who, despite sneers from their peers in the medical establishment, are making great medical strides with their patients through the science of trophology. The Western scientific equivalent of yin-yang balance in food combinations is something as well we have all learned in elementary, high school, and chemistry. Acid-alkaline balance, or pH. We all know that if we did add a measure of alkaline to an equal measure of acid, the resulting chemical solution is as neutral as plain water. That's the principle behind reaching for bicarbonate, a strong alkaloid, to relieve acid indigestion. It is an established scientific fact in Western medicine that in order to initiate efficient digestion of any concentrated animal protein, the stomach must secrete pepsin. But it is also a well-known fact that pepsin can function only in a highly acidic medium, which must be maintained for several hours for complete digestion of proteins. It is an equally well-established fact of science that when we chew a piece of bread or potato or any other carbohydrate or starch, ptyalin and other alkaline juices are immediately secreted into the food by the saliva in the mouth. When swallowed, the alkalized starches require an alkaline medium in the stomach in order to complete their digestion. Anyone should be able to figure out what therefore happens when you ingest protein and starch together. Acid and alkaline juices are secreted simultaneously in response to the incoming protein and starch, promptly neutralizing one another and leaving a weak, watery solution in the stomach that digests neither protein nor starch properly. Instead, the proteins putrefy and the starches ferment, owing to the constant presence of bacteria in the digestive tract. This putrefaction and fermentation are the primary cause of all sorts of digestive distress, including gas, heartburn, cramps, bloating, constipation, foul stools, bleeding piles, colitis, and so forth. Many so-called quote-unquote allergies are also the direct result of improper food combinations. The bloodstream picks up toxins from the putrefied fermented mess as it passes slowly through the intestines, and these toxins in turn cause rashes and hives, headaches, nausea, and other symptoms commonly branded as quote-unquote allergies. The same food that cause allergic reactions when improperly combined often have no ill side effects whatsoever when consumed according to the rules of trophology. The final fact of the matter is this: when you immobilize your stomach and impair digestive functions by consuming foods in indiscriminate combinations, the bacteria in your alimentary canal have a field day. They get all the nutrients and thrive, while you get all the wastes and suffer. According to a recent survey in America, the average American male today carries about 5 pounds of undigested, putrefied red meat in his gut. Leave 5 pounds of meat in the dark, warm, moist place for a few days and see for yourself the results of putrefaction. The severely septic condition of the human intestinal tract is unique in nature. No Western physicians take it for granted and even insist that it is harmless to the rest of the system. In fact, however, in order to protect itself from the chronic toxic irritation of improperly combined meals, the colon secretes large quantities of mucus to entrap toxic particles before they damage the colon's sensitive lining. When this occurs at every meal, every day, every week throughout the year, as is quite typical in modern Western diets, the colon ends up secreting a constant stream of mucus which accumulates and gets impacted in the folds of the colon. This results in a narrowing of the passage through the colon and a constant seeping of toxins into the bloodstream by osmosis. When the impacting of toxic mucus in the colon reaches a critical pressure, it causes a pocket to balloon outward through the colon lining, causing a condition called diverticulosis or diverticulosis. Colitis and cancer are the next stages of colon deterioration caused by these conditions. Having correlated the Tao of diet with Western scientific terminology, let's take a close look at the practical side of trophology with some concrete examples of food combining. The following categories of food combinations cover most of the culinary crimes, quote unquote, against nature committed daily throughout the world today. This list is based mainly on the work of Dr. Herbert M. Shelton, one of America's most distinguished nutritional therapists and author of the quote-unquote Bible of correct culinary combinations called Food Combining Made Easy. Proteins and starch. This is the worst possible combination of foods to mix together at a single meal, and yet it is the mainstay of modern Western diets. Meat and potatoes, hamburgers, fries, eggs and toast, tacos, pizza. When one consumes protein and starch together, the alkaline enzyme ptyalin pours into the food as it's chewed in the mouth. When the masticated food reaches the stomach, digestion of starch by alkaline enzymes continues unabated, thereby preventing the digestion of protein by pepsin and other acid secretions. The ever-present bacteria in the mouth, or in the stomach rather, are thus permitted to attack the protein and putrefaction commences, rendering nutrients in the protein food largely useless to you and producing toxic wastes and foul gases, including such poisons as indole, skatol, phenol, hydrogen sulfide, phenopropionic acid, and others. If this is the case, you may well wonder, then why does the stomach have no trouble handling foods that naturally contain both protein and starch, such as whole grains? As Dr. Shelton points out, there is a great difference between the distinction of a food, however complex its composition, and the digestion of a mixture of different foods. To a single article of food that is a starch-protein combination, the body can easily adjust its juices, but both as to the strength and the timing to the digestive requirements of the food. But when two foods are eaten with different, even opposite digestive needs, this precise adjustment of juices to requirements becomes impossible. What is the rule? Eat concentrated proteins such as meat, fish, and eggs, and cheese separately from concentrated starches such as bread, potatoes, and rice. For example, eat toast or eggs for breakfast, the hamburger patty or the bun for lunch, meat or potatoes for dinner. Next is proteins and proteins. Different proteins have different digestive requirements. For example, the strongest enzymatic action on milk occurs during the last hour of digestion, whereas on meat it occurs during the first hour, and on eggs somewhere in between. It is instructive to recall the ancient dietary law which Moses imposed on his people, forbidding the simultaneous consumption of milk and flesh. Two similar meats, such as beef and lamb, or two types of fish, such as salmon and shrimp, are not sufficiently different in nature to cause digestive conflict in the stomach, and may thus be consumed together. The rule is eat only one major type of protein at a single meal. Avoid combinations such as meat and eggs, meat and fish, fish and cheese. Ensure the assimilation of the full range of vital amino acids by varying the types of concentrated proteins taken at different meals. Next are starch and acid. Any acid food taken together with starch suspends secretion of ptyalin, a biochemical fact of life upon which all physicians agree. Therefore, if you consume oranges, lemons, and other acid fruits or acids such as vinegar along with starch, no ptyalin is secreted in the mouth to initiate the first stage of starch digestion. Consequently, the starch hits the stomach without the vital alkaline juices it needs to digest properly, permitting bacteria to ferment instead. A single teaspoon of vinegar or its equivalent in other acids, it is all it takes entirely to suspend salivary digestion of starch in the mouth. The rule is eat starches and acids at separate meals. For example, if you eat toast or cereal for breakfast, skip the orange juice as well as eggs. If you're eating a starch-based meal of noodles or rice, avoid the vinegar as well as concentrated proteins. Next is proteins and acids. Since protein requires an acid medium for proper digestion, you'd think that acid foods would facilitate proper digestion, but that's not the case. When acid foods enter the stomach, they inhibit the secretion of hydrochloric acid, and the protein digesting enzyme pepsin can work only in the presence of hydrochloric acid, not just any acid. Therefore, orange juice inhibits the proper digestion of eggs, and a strong vinegar dressing on salad inhibits the digestion of a steak. The rule is avoid combining concentrated proteins and acids at the same meal. Next is proteins and fats. In MacLeod's Physiology in Modern Medicine, we find a fact accepted by all physicians, which is fat has been shown to exert a distinct inhibiting influence on the secretion of gastric juices. For 2 or 3 hours, the ingestion of fat, or after the ingestion of fat, the concentration of hydrochloric acid and pepsin in the stomach is sharply decreased. This delays digestion of any proteins taken together with the fat, which gives bacteria ample opportunity to putrefy the protein. This is why fatty meats such as bacon and marbled steaks or lean steaks fried in fat sit so heavy in the stomach for hours after eating them. The rule is eat concentrated proteins and fats at separate meals. When you cannot avoid mixing them, eat plenty of raw vegetables to assist their digestion and passage. Next is proteins and sugars. All sugars, without exception, inhibit the secretion of gastric juices in the stomach. That's because sugars are digested neither in the mouth nor in the stomach. Instead, they pass directly into the small intestine for digestion and assimilation. When consumed in combination with proteins such as cake after steak, not only do the sugars inhibit digestion of proteins, By suppressing gastric secretions, the sugars themselves get trapped in the stomach instead of moving swiftly to the small intestine, and this delay permits bacteria to ferment the sugars, releasing nauseous toxins and gases rather than which further impair digestion. The rule is avoid consuming sugars and proteins at the same meal. Next are starches and sugars. It has been an established fact when sugars enter the mouth along with starch, the saliva secreted during mastication contains no ptyalin, thereby sabotaging starch digestion before it reaches the stomach. Furthermore, such a combination blocks passage of sugar through the stomach until starch is digested, causing it to ferment. The byproducts of sugar fermentation are acidic, which in turn further inhibits digestion of starches, which require alkaline mediums for digestion. Bread, which is a starch, and butter, which is a fat, is perfectly compatible, but when you spread a spoonful of honey or jam over it, you introduce sugars to the blend, which interfere with the digestion of the starch in bread. The same principle applies to breakfast cereals sprinkled with sugar, heavily frosted cakes, sweet pies, and so forth. The rule is eat starches and sugars separately. Next are melons. Melons are such a perfect food for humans that they require no digestion whatsoever in the stomach. Instead, they pass quickly through the stomach and move into the small intestine for digestion and assimilation. But this can only happen when the stomach is empty and melons are eaten alone or in combination with other fresh raw fruits. When consumed with or after other foods that require complex digestion in the stomach, melons cannot pass into the small intestine until digestion of other foods in the stomach is complete. So they sit and stagnate instead, quickly fermenting and causing all sorts of gastric distress. The rule for melons are eat them alone or leave them alone. Next is milk. Now we come to one of the most controversial and misunderstood items in the Western diet. Orientals and Africans have traditionally avoided milk, except as a purgative. But in the Western world, people are told to drink milk every day throughout their lives. If we look at nature, we see that the young feed exclusively on milk until weaned away from it with other foods. The natural disappearance of the milk digesting enzyme lactase from the human system upon reaching maturity proves that adult humans have no more nutritional need for milk than adult tigers or chimpanzees. Though milk is a complete protein food, when consumed raw, it also contains fat, which means that it combines poorly with any other food except itself. Yet, adults today routinely wash down other foods with cold milk. Milk curdles immediately upon entering the stomach. So if there is other food present, the curds coagulate around other food particles and insulate them from exposure to gastric juices, delaying digestion long enough to permit the onset of putrefaction. Therefore, the first and foremost rule of milk consumption is drink it alone or leave it alone. Today, milk is made even more indigestible by the universal practice of pasteurization, which destroys its natural enzymes and alters its delicate proteins. Raw milk contains the active enzymes lactase and lipase, which permit raw milk to digest itself. Pasteurized milk, which is devitalized of lactase and other active enzymes, simply cannot be properly digested by adult stomachs, and even infants have trouble with it, as evidenced by colic, rashes, respiratory ailments, gas, and other common ailments of bottle-fed babies. The lack of enzymes and alteration of vital proteins also renders the calcium and other mineral elements in milk largely unassimilable